One, two, three.
Hello, friend. The Mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from our secret ice fortress and laboratory high in the Swiss Alps. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. Keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground as Sumo and Smokestack direct your attention to a higher dimension. Are you ready? Stand by.
You okay, buddy?
Yeah, I'm just struggling with the ridiculousness of what I plan to say today.
I see.
It's just piled so high.
Yeah.
The thing is, I think it may be true. It's the crazy thing. But then I don't know what to do with that. I don't even know how to process my own information.
Oh man, it sounds kind of heavy.
It's very heavy. It's very heavy. I don't know. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to ask you first about what do you think the psychology is of the Canadians? Because recently there was a Supers Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with this event?
Some sort of large sport game where they talk about racism a lot, I think.
It's a large sport game, and at the sport game, which was not very far to their south,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people attending without any COVID restrictions.
Right.
And then they undoubtedly watch the sport game
Mm-hmm.
and live in a place where there's lots of COVID restrictions.
Yes.
And how do they square the circle of still thinking that it's good? What is that psychology? Because this has been going on the whole time, and it's sort of fascinating because it's no one really believes this is about anything to do with anything regarding a supposed virus.
Right. Yeah.
So what are they actually doing? I think maybe this is more not milk. I don't know.
What is not milk? You've said that a bunch of times.
Well,
I don't understand. What does this mean?
It's one of those words. It's one of those words you just have to pick up through usage.
Okay. Okay.
It's one of those words where you just it's like torta in the Spanish language. You just got to pick it up through usage. No one can really define it for you.
Okay. All right.
And some people will say it means sandwich, but they are wrong.
So you refuse to elaborate?
No, I will elaborate later, but I just think that it's
okay.
Knowledge gained is better than knowledge given.
All right, I understand. Yeah.
So what is going on with these people who is it just some sort of ego thing? Because I don't know. This may not seem related, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
The other night, well, first of all, what do you think is more prestigious? A Super Bowl ring,
Okay.
or a Olympic gold medal in curling?
I would say a Super Bowl ring.
Yeah, I would too. Now, is it just because it's curling? If you had a gold medal in, I don't know, if you had a gold medal in gymnastics from the Olympics,
Mm-hmm.
would that be more prestigious?
I think the gold medal in Olympics would be more prestigious because it's something that you do on your own and does require incredible physical prowess.
Yeah, but not for curling, though.
No.
Right. But do you think that the curling guy, in his own head,
Mm-hmm.
is Tom Brady?
No, I think those guys doing curling know it's not a serious sport, and they're just like, wow, I'm gonna go to the Olympics. This is cool. They're just
I go back and forth on what they're thinking in their head because they are really into it.
Right, like they drink Molson Canadian just like everybody else does. I don't think they're too up their own butts about it.
Okay. Have you seen that one American curling guy that is the quintessential American man?
No.
So he's down in the full like curling squat,
Yeah.
like very deep squat.
Yeah.
It's impressive. He's got his shuffle thing. To push the rock. He's got a nice beer belly like hanging over his knees.
Yep.
Cap that says USA on it, right?
Yeah.
Mustache. Just full luxurious mullet flowing from underneath the cap. And his eyes are just laser focused.
Yeah.
And I was just wondering if in his own head, is he Peyton Manning?
Maybe, but I get the impression that people
does he deserve to be.
Well, I think people in curling know that it's not a real sport, and it's like cornhole or something. You know what I mean? It's like there
I
are
used
people.
to think that, but I've met a lot of people extremely into cornhole to a way that is.
Yeah.
I don't know. See, I don't know what they're thinking there. Maybe, and if the world plays along with their delusion and sends them to the Olympics,
they might start believing it. Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question.
Because the other night we were at a restaurant, and it was one of these with the big table that you do for the arm wrestling.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this thing?
Yeah. It's got little handles on it and stuff.
Yeah, and then so it was one of those, and one of the ladies with us was an older woman with an adult son who has autism.
Okay.
And because he has autism, he gets hyper specifically focused on a few things. Like now he was super specifically focused on arm wrestling.
Yeah.
Recently, and so he sees this table, and he's like all into this table. And there's this guy that keeps creeping around, being like, I'll arm wrestle anybody. Right. And so eventually we were like, well, why don't you arm wrestle the autism kid? Because he's really into it. And so they do.
Yeah.
And they go back and forth for a while, and then eventually the other guy beats him.
Yeah.
And then he says with a little smirk, he's like, well, actually, I am the state arm wrestling champion. So he'd obviously been hanging around this restaurant like every night.
Right.
Just for these spur of the moment chances to say that.
Yeah.
After he arm wrestled someone.
Yeah.
The thing is, he was like, you're really good. Like you were with no practice or whatever. You were difficult. And he was like, oh, I have autism. So that gives me superhuman strength.
Really?
Which is
that?
True. Well, no, but that's what I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
Because it's true. They don't have any mental inhibitors on their muscle. Because what happens is, see, like if your muscles were to contract as hard as they can, you could break your tendons and bones.
Okay, gotcha.
Right, and so your mind. This is why in times of extreme stress, people have these superhuman lifting abilities. Okay, that you read about. And so your body's like, in your brain is like, don't flex 100% because then things will be irreparably damaged. Gotcha. But a lot of people with forms of mental retardation don't have this inhibitor, which is why they typically have been known to have increased strength. And so this was just, I just thought since we're in an age of autism, we might see a golden age of arm wrestling and so on in the future. Okay. Yeah. Cool. I don't know. I just turned on my voice recorder, by the way. I forgot about it at first.
Okay. I'll make a really smooth and seamless transition at this point.
Yeah, I know it'll notice. But so the guy at the arm wrestling thing, right, who is in his own head a mini Tom Brady, who's sitting there like just waiting to show off his Super Bowl ring equivalent.
Yeah.
Is that the same psychology that is prompting the Canadians to continue to act ridiculous?
I don't know.
Because
you mean like
Canadians,
how they can continue with their deranged restrictions even when right across the border everybody's chilling?
correct. And it's because I was thinking this, I noticed that the places that are still like really locked down hard in hard mode, or trying to be in hard mode, are all the places that have a huge chip on their shoulder about not being America. Like Canada,
Right.
Australia, until recently the UK, and New Zealand. Is all of this just a show about how, well, we did it more, we suffered more than the Americans, and that makes us better? And this is my gold medal. And you're trying to take my gold medal, you truckers, and make me just as filthy as the people in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I think
Is it
Canadian
is that
society is really proud about how liberal it is. And because COVID restrictions have somehow, by some weird means that I don't understand, become sort of a badge of left-wing authenticity. I think they're hanging on to it in some sort of gigantic Pyrrhic virtue signal. Because, you know, that's just something that urban Canadians would do. And this is, I love my Canadians up there.
You always give this disqualifier. We don't have to.
No, because it's personal for me.
Okay,
but,
I was gonna say, you know, they can't even like support the show. They don't have real money.
No, I know. It's just they trade syrup. You can't.
They can throw colored Monopoly paper at you. But they can't give
I suppose they could like snail mail us some syrup. They wanted to.
Yeah, that's all they can do. But yeah, so you don't have to. I mean, if you want to be nice because it's personal, that's fine.
Right? Yeah. No.
But we don't have any like.
It's personal.
Fiduciary responsibility.
Okay. Thank you. But the metropolitan Canadian, they don't have any sort of, like, Americans up until recently used to have pride in America and patriotic feelings and stuff. Canadians don't really have that at all.
Well, what would they be proud of?
I mean, you know, good point. So,
right?
Yeah. So
what has Canada ever done?
So, like, the patriotism in Canada is like, how flaming liberal can I be? And so they're waving around the COVID restrictions like a giant virtue signal in a way that even American urbanites have not attained to. So I think it's a lot more common in urban Canada to get shouted down by deranged cat ladies about not wearing a mask, you know, and like run out of the store. I think it's more common in urban Canada than it is in urban America, except for like maybe certain cities, you know, like Seattle, you might get yelled at, or I don't know.
Yeah, this is because the whole identity of Canada is being not America.
Yeah.
That's their entire But it's strange to me because, like, all they do to prove that is try to be more into whatever cultural thing we're doing than we are.
Right.
They don't come up with anything on their own.
Right.
And so to me, this feels like their arm wrestling championship. And they're saying, we're the best at restricting, we care the most. We are the most compassionate.
Yeah.
Now, but as people point out, I know that these Canadians who are doing this are also like planning summer vacations in America at some point.
Oh yeah, they come down here all the time.
None of it matters. It's like none of it is actually anything real.
Right.
But I think that they haven't made the connection in their own heads about what they're doing is the crazy part.
Well, it's hard to imagine for an American, but like psyops and stuff and mind control is more effective in Canada than it is in America.
I mean, it's not hard for people that have met Canadians to know that.
But like this thing, what just happened with the accusing the Christian churches of having like a genocide of indigenous children and like mass graves. and like covering it up and all this stuff. And so for those of you who don't know, the basic thing is that somebody made some claims that Christians living in rural Canada or at least near some indigenous populations at some point just killed a bunch of them and like buried their bodies in a mass grave. And so there was under this church or something, I can't remember all the details, but like under this church or something or near on the grounds, there's like a mass grave. And so everybody freaked out and was just took it as an opportunity to totally crap on Canadian Christians. And churches were burned down. It was really ugly and horrible. And then it turns out that the whole thing was just made up. Like they haven't found a single body. There's no mass grave. Somebody just made it up. It was blood libel up and down. And you know, Canada was thrown into a frenzy over this stupid garbage. And acted like a lot of them just acted like psychos. So it doesn't surprise me that they will continue to be so unhinged about COVID restrictions that obviously do no good, that aren't helping anybody, that don't even make sense, never made sense. But now it's pretty widely understood that they don't make sense, and some people are just clinging to it like they can't handle not clinging to it. It's become the center of their identity. And I think that's even more of a cultural movement in the urban centers in Canada than it is in America, which is a thing to behold, but I think it might actually be true.
Well, yeah, because I think they want their gold medal of progressivism, and they have to display it at the bar by arm wrestling autistic people.
Right. They'll literally
which is the
like
equivalent of
burn down
the equivalent
churches.
Of the trucker protest.
Yeah, they'll burn down their whole society if it will make them the most liberal people ever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're completely deranged.
And New Zealand also maybe does that, not as bad. Australia.
Yeah.
Australia, I don't. This is the thing about Australia. You know, Australia barely has internet, and that's only slightly an exaggeration. Like until recently, like within like 10 years or so, 5 years or so, like their internet was super slow. It's still pretty slow,
right? Because
they run through cables to the ocean.
Yeah,
and no one of import. And no company of import lives in Australia.
Right.
So there's no like big server farm because nothing. I mean, what are they going to do? Like wrestle crocodiles for Bitcoin? It doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, all you have as a natural resource there is emu and the social grievances of Aboriginals with boomerangs.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to like build anything on, and so they just didn't have internet for a long time, and so they are. Everything that they get in Australia, like for the past 20 years from internet, has been like from America, and I think they have a chip on their shoulder about that. But for some reason, I don't think it's as bad as Canada, just for geographical proximity.
Right.
They compare themselves more to. I guess they compare themselves a little more to the UK. I'm not sure. It's this weird thing about the supposed British Commonwealth a lot of times doesn't actually reference Britain as their model very much. It's usually us. But so New Zealand definitely does the same thing as Canada, and Australia does it, but I think to a lesser degree. So I don't know quite why their COVID stuff was so intense other than they just don't like working.
Yeah. Well, there's a huge... It's the urban-rural thing. And so a larger. But
see, that's the thing. A lot of Australia is rural, and it's
right. And like rural Canada,
I don't understand it. Yeah.
Rural Canada didn't freak out. I mean, they've been sick of this stuff a long time, and it's two different worlds. It's a lot like America. Like a lot of what you see,
you might say it's two different jurisdictions.
You might, but
foreshadowing.
But a lot of what you see. And you look at a foreign country and you think, wow, those people in Australia are crazy. I mean, the people in Canberra are crazy and the people in Sydney are crazy. But get outside of there, get out into the exurbs and out into the rural areas. It's like people in rural areas are not as affected by this this mass psychosis as people in urban areas. It's just a fact. I mean, you can argue about why that is, but I'd like to say I spend a lot of time in rural and urban areas. Like I'm not really locked into either one. And the difference is stark. And people that only live in one just don't even understand the other. Like the rurals kind of look on with puzzlement as what's going on in the cities. And the city dwellers don't even know that outside of the city, that there's a whole world of people that are not living paralyzed with fear and caught up in this psychotic lockdown nonsense. I mean, I know all that's falling off now. Thank the Lord. But I mean, during the height of this thing, when city dwellers were double masking and, spraying Lysol and everything and just acting like complete psychos out in the rural areas of this country, I mean, yeah, people were worried and some people took it seriously, but it was a different world. And that, I think it's true in Canada. It's true in Australia.
Yeah, but I guess I'm trying to, because I just had this moment watching this guy. I was like, aha, this is what it is. It's all people. Because, like, if you're in a city, paradoxically, I think your ego has to become greater.
Yeah.
Because, like, if you've been to Los Angeles, say, or New York City, say, the amount of people there is overwhelming. And so the individual, in order to do anything where they feel like they have any importance at all, has to do something weird to stand out.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is why you get so much weirdness in cities. It's because it's like, otherwise you're just completely lost in a sea of people. And you feel like, oh, there's no reason I'm even here. Like, I could just be obliterated and nothing would. This is why you get a lot of. So, but yet paradoxically, that leads to the greatest amount of conformance because if you have to conform in order to participate in being outlandish. It's strange.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of it is the city is like the temple of the self now. The modern global
the city
megacity
is the temple of the self.
It is, and in times past before globalism, and especially in like pre-Christian cities of the world, they would have their own deity that was particular to them. Who was in Ephesus? Was it the temple of Artemis? I think it was Artemis. I don't remember. But anyway, there would be like one deity that the whole city was like, that was part of its identity and its ethos, and everybody was in some way like locked into this cult of that deity. But cities were not interconnected like they are now. And now all the global megacities are sort of coincident versions of the same thing, right? They're all extensions of each other, and now we're in this new age of scientistic religion, and so man is at the center of that, and so the city is the temple of the self, and that's why the ego of the city is so powerful. And if you're a big city dweller, everybody is affected by that in the city. Even if you don't believe that, if you would say, no, I'm a Christian and I don't believe in worship of the self and scientific humanism and all this stuff, it still affects you. It affects your outlook. And so it doesn't matter what you say or think you believe. The ego trip of being an urbanite will blind you to what's happening outside of the global megacity. And that's why the global megacities have been caught up in this psychotic nonsense of COVID and putting masks on 3-year-olds all day so their faces are all chapped, and they're getting speech impediments. That's how that's the same sort of thing that people get caught up in genocides. Like, this is Hutu and Tutsi panic, machete genocide sort of stuff. Like, right. We're just doing it in this modern scientific way, this like hygienic way. And we kill the babies in the womb instead of in the street. But it's the same, like, you don't know what you're caught. If you're an urbanite, you don't know what you are caught up in. You don't. and you got to get your head out of there and take a look around, because what's happened in the cities and what city dwellers have largely just gone along with, it's shameful. It's insane.
Not that they will ever have the cognitive ability to feel shame.
Well, the individual
most of them are
can.
Canadians.
Like as a group, no, they will never be free. I don't think, as long as globalism and the internet and all that stuff still exists. As a group, they'll never be free. But the individual, if you look at someone at the individual level, yes, an individual person can be free of it. They can wake up. People have woken up before.
This is why I think we need to reclaim the term pagan, because that was a psyop against rural people from the beginning. Eventually it got applied to like people that were not Christian or whatever,
right?
Or not one of the monotheistic religions. But originally it just sort of meant farmer.
Yeah, or like non-Roman.
Yeah, like out in the sticks, because and apparently it started as like a military insult or something, like he's about as useful as a pagan, because the people out on the farms were not under contract, and that's important for later, we're not under contract to like be in the military, and so they didn't like train or whatever.
Right.
And so some bishops and priests and pastors started using that as like, well, if you're not this way or that way, you're about as useful in the Lord's army as a pagan. So it's kind of like a barbarian sort of a concept. Yeah. This is why I've been trying to rehabilitate the word pagan. Not to the greatest of successes, but Lewis and Tolkien agree with me that it should happen. Oh. They both said similar things.
Okay.
So maybe it's something that we could continue to work on. But yeah, there's always been this divide, and I was wondering, like, why is the divide happening? Is it the same psychology as the arm wrestling man? Like, but I think you're right, and it comes down to like, this is when you're around a lot of people, the ego has to do more to stand out. Yeah. As a self-protection mechanism, because otherwise you do get lost in the completeness of the Borg collective. Mm-hmm. And so you have to. I don't know. Yeah, it's strange. It's strange because you do that, but also you are still in the Borg. It's difficult to understand why it happens. Yeah. Because I was just thinking, like, they're all sitting there doing this. They're gonna send police after the people on the bridge who are protesting this, and then they're also watching the Super Bowl where no one's doing it. Yeah. Like, just to their south. And so how does that process in their minds? How do they square that circle? And I don't know that they ever do. I think most people get by just ignoring inconsistencies in their thought patterns and getting mad at people who point them out. Well, yes. Right. That's because everyone is a spiritual Canadian. I'm sorry, Canada. You don't deserve. Well, you do deserve it, but not all of you deserve it. Not all of you deserve it. What if I were to tell you? What if I were to draw a line between the ancient Babylonian goddess of the sea, Tiamat, okay, and your social security number? That'd be a pretty interesting connection. Tiamat, Babylonian sea goddess? Yeah. Okay. What if I were to tie a knot with a bow around it that made you think, oh my goodness, those are the same thing? Whoa, okay. Well, what if I were able to do that? What would you say? Would you say, wow? I think I'd have a lot to think about after we were done with the show here. Right, you would, and I this is why I struggle. This is maybe this show has such red pills in it. I'm not 100% confident that they can be elucidated. Mm. Like, this may be one of those things where, like, this may be like a if you know thing. I don't know. I struggled with this because it's so. What I'm going to talk about is so weird that people are not going to believe it, and some people will. And I don't even know if they can believe it, and yet there are people who have used this knowledge to do the things that I'm describing and have gotten it like sealed by the government.
Interesting.
Like, right?
Okay.
So like, because on last week's show, I made some interesting statements at times.
Sure. Yeah.
Like I said things like, if you do it correctly, you don't even have to pay taxes.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And people probably didn't believe me.
I mean, I don't believe you, but
I know. So I thought, but it's because you're worshiping Tiamat. See,
okay.
But you don't know it.
Ah, okay. All right.
So let me. How to begin? Okay, truth is established. Remember the Bible verse. Truth is established on 2 or more witnesses.
Yes.
Okay, so let's start there, and then Jordan Peterson used to talk a lot about Tiamat. It was his thing for like a while. He'd talk about Tiamat and lobsters. Okay. And then he would go and do benzos and die. And then he'd come back. And then he'd talk about Tiamat, and then he would go do more drugs. Okay. Right? Tiamat was this Babylonian sea goddess, the primordial goddess of the sea. Like where all chaos comes from, right? And that's important because this idea that the sea is the source of chaos, is a different realm than the land, and that they're different. It's owned by a different god. Okay. That idea is present in like all of the Near East religions, if you know where to look for it. Like, for example, this is why in the Bible, like in the temple, they have there's this like if you read about the descriptions of all the implements they put there in the temple, which is boring, but because it's like describes the exact dimensions of like candlesticks and stuff. Sure. It's boring, but there's stuff there like a sea made of bronze. Yeah. And like Yahweh telling it to get back. Right? Or like some representation of Yahweh's voice doing that. Okay. And so that's there, and that's also why there's so many things with Jesus, like walking on the water, turning water to wine, calming the storm at sea. Calming the storm at sea. He's showing his authority over the sea realm. Yeah. Right? The realm of chaos, which is still present in our own mythology, like with evolution and so on, like everything, primordial soup of the sea, lightning strike life, sort of thing. I mean, it was really Hebraic thinking was exactly along those lines. I mean, the sea was chaos and the unknown, and you stay out of it, basically. Right, which is why the Jews were never good on boats in the Bible. Right. And probably, I don't know if they are now. I don't know how the Israeli Navy does. But every time in the Bible a Jew gets on the boat, they end up in a shipwreck. Yeah, they don't have a good record with that, no. No, they don't. So, okay, so keep that in mind. All right, there's that. And then I want you to then just I don't want to explain this part because it would take too long, but just accept for the sake of argument that basically that Tiamat deity has been tied to Satan. Okay. Through various ways. Like Seth, or Set rather, in I forget Seth or Set. In Egyptian mythology, Shaitan, Satan, Saturn, same deal. Okay. Okay, and it's this realm of the sea and the realm of the land. Okay. And that's why the flood was so catastrophic, because like the flood was the sea taking over, right? Because though God did the flood, God was allowing what the people had asked for, which was the chaos, to come up.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why in Revelations, there's no more sea anymore. It goes away because the chaos has been defeated.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, I want you to then think about difference between the regular law that we have and nautical law.
Okay.
And this comes from the same division, whether or not people realize it. There's laws for the sea, and then there's laws for the land. Like just when you're on international waters, different rules apply.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what if I were to tell you that you, my friend, and all of our listeners have been declared dead and lost at sea and have been replaced with a straw man? Just what if?
Okay.
What if? Because we've made so one thing that I like in the circles that I run in, we actually make progress.
Mm-hmm.
We do not just go the Nancy Pelosi over and over again.
Right.
We figure out things and we move forward.
Yep.
And so not long ago, Crow had a couple of people on his show who really did some work. And one of those people, so for a long time, like I say, people that have, because how, and I know this is a bit rambly, but it'll focus in, but I'm just trying to, there's a smattering of things we have to, have you ever asked yourself how the government has authority to tax you?
No, I really haven't.
Right. A lot of people haven't. Like, where does this authority to tax you come from?
I mean, I guess I just assume it's violence at the end of the day.
Right. People assume it's violence. Yeah. They assume it's violence, and then that fuels a lot of libertarian angst. Mm-hmm. Right. And it fuels the way people feel about their government and what they allow the government to do.
Blood makes the green grass grow.
Yeah. Right. So, but what if that's not the case? What if there's actually, because Satan is first and foremost a legalist. Mm-hmm. Like one of the greatest tricks the devil ever pulled was to convince people that God was the legalistic one. Like God doesn't care. It's like you just say, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he's like, "Oh, it's fine." But Satan's like, "Oh, I have it written in blood right here. I'm going to get you forever." Right? And that's that. And Satan actually doesn't do anything technically illegal. Just in the same way that I've said before that demons don't technically lie. Okay. Right? It's this very similar. They're doing things by the book. What evil is really is a rigid application of the law to nefarious ends without any regard for the spirit of the law. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's often what evil is. Which is why St. Paul said, the letter of the law killeth, but the spirit giveth life. Right.
Even the name Satan means accuser, which is like a
exactly.
legal prosecutor. Yeah.
Yes, it's illegal. He's a prosecutor, right? And he does everything by the book, like really by the book. And so, if you believe that, as we're told in various holy books, that the institutions of earth are actually put there by God, then you have to say, well, then how is evil perpetrated if evil is being done by the books? And this is a question we've wrestled with in our circles for a while, because we were and there's been hints. Like I've talked about the birth certificate before. Mm-hmm. There have been hints that maybe this was something that had something to do with it. And it was also suspicious because we started noticing that the same series of documents is generated under slightly different terminology and names, right? But it's basically they do the same thing. Like if you're in Finland or whatever, it's called something a little different, but it's the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
In basically every country on Earth, like everyone, like the process of paperwork for registering a person is almost identical in every developed country on Earth, regardless of culture, language, whatever. And we were like, that's interesting. Why would that be? Because I mean like super specific.
Okay.
So
what you mean, like the form of the birth certificate and stuff?
The form, but also like the kinds of documents. Like there's more than one. So
there's like
we had a fellow
components. There's a bunch of components and they're the same, even if the language is different and the names are different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think I follow you.
Correct. And so we had a fellow recently who thought, well, I'll just see how far I can figure out where this goes, this thread. And he was a fellow from Sweden. And like I said, it works. I think it works. I think it applies, though you'll have to figure out a little bit, like the agency names will be different.
Mm-hmm.
I think it applies globally because some of the certificates are even named exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Which is strange. But he just started requesting all of the documents around his birth from the hospital, from the government. And it took him like a year and something to get them all. And they didn't want to really give them. But they give you some very interesting... If you actually sit down and read them and look at them, it becomes a bit of a maze. A bit of a Lovecraftian horror show. And a puzzle. And no one that gives you the documents can tell you what any of them are.
Really?
What do any of them mean?
I mean, are these?
Yeah.
Do the Americans get these too? Like,
yes.
how many are we talking besides birth certificate and like social security card? What are we talking about?
We'll go through it.
Okay.
There's maybe like 10.
Whoa. Okay. All right.
Now, some of them are copies of the same one, slightly different, like with something added every time. Like it goes from one agency to another, and then that agency adds some numbers or stamps, and that goes to another agency who adds some numbers or stamps. And then by the end of it, it's like a totally different thing, but it started with the same base.
Interesting. Okay. All right.
Okay. So now let me talk. Now let me ask you about the UCMJ.
Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Correct.
Yeah.
The Uniform Code of Military Justice. Do you see how this all ties together?
No.
Do you see how this all
Not
ties
remotely,
together yet,
no.
listener? But it's gonna when it's tied together, you're like,
I'm
whoa.
curious though. You've piqued my curiosity.
Right. So when you're in the military, are you under the U.S. Constitution? Sorta.
So yeah, but it's different. There's like a whole other legal structure that you're also under.
Right. You're actually under. You're primarily judged under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is something you voluntarily agreed to put yourself under.
Yeah.
It's a different form of law. You do not have the same rights and responsibilities as you do as a United States citizen.
It's got its own court system.
It's got its own court system. It's got its own like legal proceedings, which is why you are sent to a military court if you do something in the military first, right? Now they don't really tell you when you're signing up for this at the recruiter's office that you're going to sign up to be under a different legal system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you read all the papers you sign, it's there, but they don't make a big show of it's like the terms and service agreement. It's like, yeah, just agree.
Right.
But they don't really like say, and now listen, you're going to give up some right. Now, I don't know how much weight to put behind this, but I've had multiple military people tell me that they were occasionally threatened with like, if you do such and such and get hurt, we're going to charge you with damage to government property, which is extreme, but like, there's a bit of truth to that.
Okay.
Like you're sort of owned.
Yeah.
Right. Which is why they sometimes can prohibit you from getting tattoos and so forth and so on.
Or
for, like,
force
the
you to
Facebook
get
government
vaccinations.
Yeah. So this is a uniform code of military justice. So there are different legal systems beyond the one of the U.S. Constitution that you can be put under voluntarily by accepting a title and privilege. So you get you get the title of like private or lance corporal or whatever, and each of those gives you certain privileges and benefits, and they come with duties and responsibilities. And then, and if you go into that contract, then you get into a different legal system. And there's lots of different ones. Like if you sign on for like a university or whatever, you are signing up for like, to some degree, the university legal system, which isn't nearly as powerful, but they do have like, internal review boards and like punishments and stuff. They can mete out to students and administrators and so forth. Not as strong as the UCMJ, but it's a different thing. And also your terms of service is this: when you sign up for a Twitter or an Instagram, you're saying, like, if you want to play in our sandbox, here are the rules to the sandbox.
Okay.
Right? And so people can do that. And what you're actually doing legally, if you drill down on like, well, what is this? You're entering into a trust agreement. And trust agreements are basically the mechanism that the Notnilk has used for hundreds of thousands of years or however long to maintain satanic rule. Now, what is the Notnilk? Notnilk is Clinton spelled backwards.
Okay.
And this is a phrase that we've come up with as because it's symbolic of two things. One, it's the upside down, it's the inverse, which is the way the devil operates, because it's backwards. And two, it's the name of someone who's a high priestess of, because it's both Bill and Hillary were like high up in there.
Yeah. So
it's like the male and female high priest, high priestess versions of the inverse. It's the Notnilk.
Gotcha.
And the trust agreements are how the Notnilk operate, because you go between the living, it's the realm of the living and the realm of the dead, and this is why corporations are people. Okay, is anything questioned yet?
I kind of didn't really understand how we got to corporations or people.
Oh, right. Corporations are people because legally, you can engage in trade as a natural man or a natural woman, which means just a biological human being.
Yes.
You cannot engage, if you actually read the strict definitions of words in the legal dictionary, in commerce as a natural person, like taking out loans, insurance.
Why can I not take out a loan as a natural person?
Well, you can't in their system. I mean, if you were just going to your buddy Frank, you said, "Hey Frank," then that would be fine. But in the realm where that's done of dollars and cents with paperwork filed in the whole system, you can't do it. And we know that you can't do it because there was the girl who didn't exist. Her name was Faith. She was born in not an Amish community, but a religious commune in the 90s. And she gained a brief bit of notoriety because when she graduated from school or homeschool, she was like, I'll go to college. And she tried to go to college. And they said, well, you need a social security number. And she said, well, I don't have one of those. She went and said, I'll go get one of those. They said, well, you need a driver's license. She said, I don't have one of those. I'll go get one. They said, well, you need a birth certificate. And she said, well, I don't have one of those. I'll go see if I can get one. And they didn't. And nothing could happen.
Yeah.
Nothing could happen until she had these documents. Now, she still had a kind of citizenship. But she didn't have the version that we have. Because she still had rights, she could own property and such in America, but she couldn't access the benefits and privileges of the trust agreement that you enter into when you have all of these documents.
Okay.
Okay, is that beginning? So, and so this is why a corpus. This is why the U.S. court has ruled that corporations are people, because people does not mean. I've said this before. I need to drill it home. Person, people does not mean a human being.
Okay.
A person is defined as a corpus, a body. And that's even in the word. Person means persona. It's the fake mask that the Greek actors would wear. Persona, person means mask.
So it's like every person in corporation has this like immaterial paperwork entity that...
Correct.
Okay. I think I see where you're going.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like I've created LLCs before, and what you do is you make up it actually asks you to create a name for an entity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so what I'm trying to get people to see is that basically what happens at birth is that there's a complicated mechanism that is very underhanded that you don't really notice that assigns you essentially a company in your own name. Let's say your name was Joe Smith, and that's your name as a person, when I was a person. See, that's complicated, as a living human being. Yeah. And then they say, and then there's also Joe Smith, the person. Okay, that's what happens. But you don't actually have ownership of the trust created in your name. They steal that from you. And that's why they have, and you know, when you buy a car, do you actually own the car?
I don't know. In this model, I'm not sure.
Well, the reason they can repossess your car or tow it at will, is because it's not your property.
Yeah, it's legal. Like there's in practice there's sort of a complicated licensing agreement for the car that is revocable by several means.
Yes. Well, what happens is it's the same thing. It's the same. So, so you sign a piece of paper, and when you buy a car and you anytime you register anything, mm-hmm. what that is you're giving. So you get you get it registered, you get the stickers and all this stuff, and you get what we call the equitable title, which is use and possession of the thing, while someone else gets the legal title, which is the controlling interest of the thing.
Okay.
Those are two separate things, and that's basically the what trusts handle is like the legal title, but then you entrust control of the thing to someone else. That's why it's called a trust.
So then, who owns my car?
Well, the government does, and that's why the police can tow it away anytime they don't, because it's not your property legally.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if my car is paid for.
No, you just paid for.
We're not talking about the loan here.
Equitable title of yours.
Okay.
We're not talking about.
We're not talking about like the loan here.
No, because when you're registering it, you're signing it. That's why there's this. If you actually like read like the registration papers, which no one does, it's like, well, you know, and this is sort of it becomes sort of like they get the legal title to the car, and that's why they can tell you that you have to have insurance to drive it, and they have to do this and that,
mm-hmm.
right? This also happens when you sign mortgage papers, which is why you have to pay property taxes for your whole life, regardless of if you've paid off the house or not. It happens anytime you're doing anything that involves a bank or your credit card or an insurance or whatever. You're almost always entering into some sort of trust, because there's like, well, we're going to give you a thing and you have use of it and possession of it, but we retain like legal control over it if we ever wanted to use it.
Right.
And that's what a trust is. Just like Britney Spears in the trust, mm-hmm. her conservatorship. That's a type of trust. It's like, well, you retain but we retain these things legally, right?
So what you're saying is that I'm Britney Spears, and everyone is Britney Spears. Okay,
that's correct. Right. You're Britney Spears. So we had a fellow he's from a Scandinavian country. He didn't want to name it, and he called himself Sui Generis, mm-hmm.
Just
to maintain anonymity. And he went to the process of, like I said, going through all this and like, well, what if I actually like looked at these things? Could I figure out if our theory that this birth certificate thing has something to do with it is true, I ought to be able to figure it out somewhere. Okay. So he starts just emailing people and asking for all these documents. And the first ones he gets is like, his mother's like hospital visits before he's and so on. And then then it really goes to like after that is like basically his C-section where he was birthed from, and then like all these documents are generated. So he gets this and the whole time he's just, being very respectful, asking for things. And so there's a couple of different documents presented to him. Pregnancy ward notes, which is where his mother was there. Laboratory records, cesarean section report, the birth report, the certificate of live birth, the notification of a child to the public register, and then the birth certificate. And all these things are produced around his birth.
Okay, I mean, just right there was several documents that I've not heard of or didn't understand were different, like birth certificate and certificate of live birth.
Right.
What is that about?
I know. Yeah. So he gets all this and he looks at it, and he gets the certificate of live birth, and it says, or actually, I think this was the notification to the popular register. Yeah, it's confusing. It's hard to keep forward. It's confusing on purpose because they don't want you to notice what they're doing. And it said in small print. He's like in his classic, it's just sort of small print, like under the main document. It said that this was a certificate. It was a certification, but it specifically said only that it was an extract from the popular register, but it's not a certification of the content to be correct. And he said, that's an interesting line to put on. It's a certificate of the fact that that this came from the public population register, but is not a certificate that the content of this thing is correct. And that sort of started the waterfall. He's like, well, I'm going to dig into that phrase because that seems a little fishy. Okay. Right? And this is why I said
this
on
was,
Twitter, I said...
What document was this? What was this?
This was I believe this was the notification of a child on the popular register, which is sort of like our... We have an equivalent to that here in America, and each state has like a register of births.
Okay.
That happen.
All right.
So he said, I'm going to start drilling into that. And this is why I said on Twitter, I said, well, this is levels of autism that you wouldn't even imagine.
Yeah, you've already fulfilled your promise.
This guy was like, well, what does this mean? And what is this? And what is this? And the astounding thing is that no one he could get in contact with, either at the hospital or any of these government offices that issues these documents, knows what any of these things mean.
They don't know what any believable.
Of them are. Right?
Yeah.
So like I said, the first ones are his mom going to the hospital, and there's not a lot of detail there except that it says, that the baby's kicking and there's blood tests. And he said, I think that's important, really, because it proves that I was alive before my birthday, which is a small detail. Because if you look at like what live means in like legal dictionary, it means evidence of life is breathing, pulsations, or voluntary muscle movement. Mm-hmm. And so this is like this document, he said, sort of legally proves that I'm alive before I was actually born.
Right.
Right. And so he said, maybe that doesn't mean very much. Maybe it does. But he says, now here's the next interesting bit. The next piece of evidence I get, and he worked out the chronological order these arrived in, is the birth report. And again, this is a hospital document. It's from a template. Who knows where the template comes from? He asked. They said, we don't know who gave us the template. With boxes and little titles of the boxes of what to put there, right? Super. Here's the interesting bit. It has 2 sections. And this is something that's also done in America. In various guises and in various different ways, but this is basically pretty standard. It has one section titled child and another section titled birth.
Okay.
Right? And the section where it says child has the measurements of him, the boy, the time of birth, the weight, and a bunch of other stuff. And then in the section under birth, it has those same measurements, time and weight, for the placenta.
What?
Right. And if you have a kid in America and you pay attention, they do weigh the placenta in most places, and then they cart it off somewhere.
Okay.
They cut it, right? And they just remove it. And we've asked in our circles, like nurses, where does the placenta go? And they say, well, we'll do this and this with it. We don't know what happens. They say the official line is that until recently they used it to make skin cream.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe. But so it's not like disposed of. Someone is keeping it. Okay? And you say, well, wait a minute. How can you legally do? Isn't that like sort of ours? Am I signing that away? Like, what's happening? But so yeah, so on this birth report, there's the weight and the time of birth of the child, and then there's the weight and the time of birth of the placenta, and they're slightly different.
Okay.
Okay. So then, the next document.
Wait, they record the time that the placenta is delivered?
Correct.
Why is that important to anybody?
Well, good question. But think about this: why is birth also a nautical term?
No, okay.
It's true though. It's because birth is when a ship hits the ground on the shore, and this is where you've left the water because you're floating in water.
Yeah.
To come onto the land. It's the same exact thing. Right? Which is why it has the exact word.
Okay.
As Jesus said, you have to be born through water and the Spirit. Being born. It's why it's called a birth canal. Because and this is why the goddess of chaos is feminine. Because you're in the amniotic fluid, you are literally floating in water and therefore under a different jurisdiction.
Oh man. Okay.
I know, but I'm going to sort of prove that.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So then the next document is the certificate of live birth. This is not the birth certificate. And again, just like you're issued a name that's a legal entity with your same name to confuse you.
Yeah.
It's very similar. It's very close to a birth certificate, but it's actually different. And live birth is what they call a term of art. Mm-hmm. So a term of art, if you don't recognize that phrase, is any word used in a specific context, usually technical or scientific, to mean something in that context that would typically mean something else than the conventional meaning of the word. So like a good example is like child. So like child has a meaning in software programming.
Yeah.
Coding.
Mm-hmm.
Like parent-child relationship. And so in that would be a term of art within computer science that has a different meaning than the conventional meaning. Okay. So live birth is also appears to be a term of art. And it means like I said, that you are born. It appears to mean that you are born with some evidence of life stated legally, like twitching, pulsations, respiration. Okay. And if you try to find your certificate of live birth, it's very difficult. They don't want you to get this one. This one, if you search for it on Google, it usually always just kicks you over to birth certificate or whatever. It takes a bit of doing. Sui Generis said it took him more than a year to get his hands on it. He had to email the hospital back and forth. He had to eventually go ask the legal person of the hospital, this and this is actually where I wanted to have this and whatever.
Right.
So this certificate of live birth is a document issued at the hospital, and the birth certificate is a population register document from the state.
So the government issues a birth certificate. The hospital
Correct.
issues a certificate of live birth.
All right. Yes.
Okay.
Right. So the certificate of live birth would be the one the doctor in the hospital is signing in most cases. And then a later version, the birth certificate, is the one that has been made by the state.
Okay.
Right? Because if you think about it, the doctor can't issue you a state document. The state has to issue a state document.
Right.
Right? So he gives you, but the state uses his document as the basis for creation of their document.
Right. So the certificate of live birth is saying a new human has been born into the world and is alive right here in front of me, and I'm certifying that.
Well, it's saying that there's two things happened. A child was born and a placenta was born.
Okay. This is weird.
I know.
Okay.
I know. This is what I say. It's levels of red pill that most people aren't ready for. Okay, so then you have the information of the baby filled in, and you had two measurements. But okay, this is certificate of live birth has the two measurements. Okay, and then you get so then you get the let's see. All right, let me think about it. Okay, so then you get back the birth. Their certificate. Another point on the certificate of live birth is there's an interesting little sentence on the top saying, he's got all these documents. He's just showing. He's saying it says this is to be issued for every live birth, which kind of indicates there are multiple live births happening. I don't know, but it's just like, why would you put that on a document for one child? This is to be issued for every live birth.
Like why refer to other people's births?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Now when some might say like, well, it's for twins or something. Okay, maybe. And another interesting detail is that the word live birth is written in a very funny way. So basically the live, you have the letters, so everything else in the document is typed normally, but then you have live as if L space I space V space E space birth.
What?
I know. And that almost feels like...
Are they all like this?
It almost feels like... Well, at least all the ones in his... I'm not sure if it's the same everywhere, but that almost feels like an acronym or something.
Okay, yeah.
Like it's there to obfuscate something else. So, I don't know. He goes back and forth. He's like, what does this mean? What does this mean? Like, I don't know what that means. I just back and forth with the hospital and the office of the public registrar, and they're like, we don't know. We don't know anything that you're talking about, right? And so the certificate of live birth is the last document where you have any reference to any biological matter. Everything from there on out is there's no reference to anything biological. There's no weight or measurements or anything. And also on the certificate of live birth, there's no name on it. There's no name. So they don't put on the name of like little Billy was born today, Billy Thompson. There's just kid was born, a child born, male, whatever, weight, and then over here placenta. Mm-hmm. And that document, according to the registrar, is sent to whoever is in charge of the population registrar, which, in his case, was the Protestant church of the Nordic country that he resided in. Okay. And they take the information and they produce the next document, which is the notification. So again, this is another document. So they're not creating the public registrar here. So the certificate of live birth is handed over to the church in his case, and that happens in Catholic countries. This happens to the Catholic Church, and so forth and so on. This live birth is given to the church, and the church then issues a notification of a child to the public register. So it's not the certificate itself, it's an in-between document. Okay. All right. And this document dates forward from the operation of the C-section a month and 3 days. So it basically comes out to 2 months, 3 days later. They issue this notification of a child to the public registrar. And he got 2 copies of this. One is from the church archive and one is from the registrar, the population registrar. Okay. Okay. I know this is confusing. Try to follow. And so he says, when I got this document, And I said, like, well, who's issuing these things? Like, where is this coming from? And she's like, I don't know. And he said, what happens to it? She said, well, the process is the hospital gets the thing, and the hospital has the documentations and sends everything, quote unquote, to either the church or the police. And they was like, the police? Yeah, the police. So he said, I basically brushed that off as like, I thought they were talking about, like, I don't know, if you had a civil marriage or you're not a member of the church or whatever, you would have to go to the police instead of the church, or it's like a magistrate registration. Okay. But he said, I don't know. I said, I just brushed that off. But then later I figured out maybe what it was about. So the church is operating in the capacity of a record keeper. Mm-hmm. They were operating in the capacity sort of as a state official doing this document, which is sort of a huge tale of like how deep the not milk is embedded in the world. So, okay. So again, let's recap. He's born. There's a certificate of live birth, which has his weight and the weight of his placenta recorded as two different births. And then that is sent to the church, who issues a notification of a child to the public registrar document, to the public registrar, which then issues a birth certificate.
How does the name get on there? If it's like...
That's a good question. It never shows up on the same document. So the information of the child being born and all the biological matter and the name of the child never shows up on the same document. So what is really being named?
The paper person?
Well...
The legal entity?
The placenta. like seriously, how can you prove it isn't? Like, because they took two different things, both of them were considered live births, the paperwork goes away, then it comes back and you get a birth certificate with a name on it.
Okay.
What did they name?
I don't know. Like, and where did they get the name? Like, how did the bureaucrat know what name to put on it? I mean, in America...
Well, so they do ask the mother, like, to name, but that's on a separate thing than the live certificate of live birth.
Yeah, that's true. It's different paper. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same everywhere in every country.
I'm trying to go back and remember when my own kids were born, like all the different paperwork we filled out. It's
the same steps everywhere in every country, which is very interesting.
Yeah, like why not put the name of the kid on?
Right? Why not? Because what if they're issuing you? What if they issue a certificate of live birth? Because it does technically, legally, like I said, the devil does it technically. He always follows the technical rules. Legally, something is said to be alive if it is capable of pulsation or automatic movement, which after you cut the cord and move the placenta still is a bit.
Really? The placenta can move?
Well, I mean, it has a bit of like,
I mean, I know it has like circulatory capabilities, right?
Yeah, it's like small. I mean, you could it's small circulatory. It's not a lot,
right?
But like, it would technically fulfill that definition if you really were a stickler about it. Okay. Because it has some of its own some degree, not for very long. After it's just like if you cut off a finger or something, it's doing some biological processes for a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Before it dies. Similar idea. So it would technically fulfill the definition of a live birth. Then that paperwork is sent away, and without any reference to which one it's naming, a birth certificate comes back. Okay?
Okay. But it's sort of weird to assume that they're naming the placenta.
It is weird to assume they're naming the placenta, but they never said they weren't, and no one ever asked them.
Okay. Well, but I still need a reason to think that that's what they're doing.
Okay, well, here would be your reason. Okay. So here's why the office of the registrar sends it to the police, because in the laws of his country, and it's similar in most countries, if you have a piece of missing property and it's on the campus of a business or a government office, what you do is you're supposed to send it to the police, and if no one claims it for like a certain amount of time, usually like a month or so, it becomes the owner of whoever's property it was on. It becomes their ownership.
Okay.
So they send something to the police, wait a month, and then they issue a document. So legally, like, I don't know, is in some capacity something acting under the jurisdiction of the police receiving a bloody box somewhere or something? I don't know. But they wait a month. Then they're like, oh, this is our property now.
Mm-hmm.
Issue that, a birth certificate, and send it back to you. And when they do, the legal entity they create is given the rights and privileges you're associated with when you have your birth certificate and your and all that stuff that we talked about that Faith didn't have because she didn't have all this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the obligation is the obligation to fulfill the debts of the U.S. government, which is why they can take taxes from you, and also to follow the rules of the U.S. government.
Okay.
Okay, and they send that back to you. Now, is that you? No, but what if you agree that it is? Right? What if you consent to the fact that it is?
Mm-hmm.
Because if the truth is established by two or more witnesses, again, everything is by the book, like by the book, like the Bible. And the state says, well, this is you. And you say, yeah, that's me. And it's like, well, check. So you are actually identifying with a dead entity, which is why you are a corpus, which is how you can operate in the realm of commerce.
Okay, so I'm agreeing that...
Yeah, I know it's crazy.
I'm just trying to get my head around this. Okay.
That's fine, yeah.
The state owns the placenta and creates a legal...
Well, they say they do if it's not claimed within the specified time.
Yeah, okay, right. So it's like...
Right.
And that's law of the sea, like unclaimed property.
Exactly, because this would be a thing that was birthed.
Like they salvage it at sea. Okay, I get the nautical idea there.
Yeah.
And so then they create this legal entity around the placenta, and then I agree to be considered. I say I am that placenta, even though I'm not.
Right.
But if I agree to it, I can be held to that agreement.
Correct. Because you never really dug into who all this documentation was about, did you?
No.
You just said, "Oh yeah, that's me."
Okay.
Right? And so they say,
it's like a trick.
Yeah, it is a trick. Like, it is fraudulent, and this is why if you challenge it, you can get out of it. But as long as you're agreeing to it, you're not, and that's on purpose, and it's maybe good. Right? Okay, so because this is what I told you about the people that don't have to pay the taxes. So there are people, and you can find them. I can point you to them if you want. They usually keep fairly private because it's one thing if you do this. It's another thing if you tell people exactly how to do it.
Okay.
These people start getting a little threatening about it. But there are people who basically what they do. Because another thing you notice, if you ever register a company, is that legally it's always in all caps.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. And so is your birth name on your birth certificate.
Interesting. Okay.
Like your uppercase, lowercase name is never used. And so, like there's a fellow who goes by the name of KL. I'll just keep calling him KL. And he went through this process and he went to the judge. He filed a bunch of different paperwork, but eventually he basically went to the judge and said, I'm going to change my name. And he said, Crow asked him, do people get like belligerent? Are they upset with you for doing this? He's like, no. He's like, actually, they're very when you do this, they get really like, oh, here's someone that finally figured it out. Isn't this great? Someone finally came in here and is using the law the way we're meant to do it. Right. And so he said the first, you follow the thing and you got to prove that you know what you're doing. Because otherwise, you can't sign up to something if you don't know what it is. So they ask you a couple of questions. And he said, I went there and I was having my name changed legally on all my records from the all caps name to the version of it that we standardly write with the uppercase is only the first letter. And he said, the first question, the judge sat down and he says, wait a minute, I don't understand what you're doing here. Isn't this the same name? You're doing the upper lower thing, but is it the same name? And I said, well, no, as a matter of fact, Your Honor, it's not the same thing legally. They're two different entities. I'm here today to require firsthand perfected knowledge of the facts of my true name, and any references to the assumed name of my birth are not admissible. And the judge is like, okay, whatever. Yeah. Grants it. And he tells him where to go. And then basically what happens is he renounces U.S. citizenship by doing this.
Okay.
And then you don't have to pay. You're not a U.S. citizen anymore.
Right.
But you are, like Faith was, an American national, which is not the same thing.
Okay.
American national still has the basic rights of a private person, but you will not have access to any of the benefits and privileges of being in the trust agreement you signed up for inadvertently by being. So you cannot get Social Security.
So I feel let's back up a little bit. I
Okay.
feel like we kind of breezed over the legal process that this person did, and what
Right.
exactly claims that they're making to the judge, and how does all that, when you're changing your name from all caps to, how does
Yeah. Okay, so, and I know people are like, that doesn't matter. It actually does matter. That's why they always write it in all caps. Because if you ask a lawyer, like, why do you do this? They're like, well, I don't know. It's just convention. And it's like, okay, well, if I write it in lowercase, will they kick it back to me? Yeah. So it's not that it matters. It's not a.
Okay.
It's not a thing. So, it's okay. So the legal process. So basically, what happens is anybody can make a claim, and if you agree to it, then that's the witness of two people,
Right.
which means it's accepted. And so what they claim is that this is you, and you. This is why we talked about voluntary consent-based slavery. When the judge gets up there and they go, Mr. Anderson, you say, yes, Judge. Then you consented that that's who you are. Right? It's right there. Boom, boom.
Well, if I don't do that, I won't be able to change my documents, right?
Oh, no. No, you can.
Oh.
You can. Because the first thing that happens is he'll go, Mr. Anderson. And he says, well, Mr. Anderson, please come forward. And you just don't say anything. He says, are you the Mr. Anderson? And then what he said, KL said in this thing, and I've heard this from other people who have done this. He says, because you don't make claims. Here's the thing. You don't make claims. You just ask questions. Then this is the only claim he made. He said, you may consider me the beneficiary of that, the trust in that name.
Okay.
Which sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I know. But so if you make claims, you're the one that has to back it up with evidence. And so he just says, Your Honor, is there any evidence that you can present that I am the person on this certificate? What do they got? Nowhere was it ever on the same document that it was the same person.
Okay. All right.
There's nothing there, right? And
So like the physical details of an organism born into the world, a human person,
are never connected to the name.
Is just a bunch of, that's the biological record, and then the state entity is a wholly different one, and they're never on the same document together. They're never connected.
Correct.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
And so, but you agreeing that that's who you are, and all of the machinery for you to get out of this is already there. Just no one uses it. It's already, all the legal paper, all the forms are there. Everything is there. And so you go through there and you basically, when people get into trouble with this stuff is they start making claims. They said, I am this, I am that. That's not what it is. You just ask them to prove their case. Right? You say, well, they're the one making the claim. I don't agree to the claim. So can you prove that I actually am this person? Right? And they can't. They can't. And in fact, after he went through this, let me see if I can find the verbiage here. So he's no longer a U.S. citizen, right? After he does this, you're not under a contractual obligation to pay. You're not liable for federal income tax, and you're also weirdly not prosecutable for anything that isn't like a crime against another human being. Which I know sounds crazy, but like after he did this thing, like he didn't have to, like just small things, like he was in the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And he was in line, and they said, they came and got him and said, sir, you're in the wrong line. Please go over to this other line. And he didn't have to take off his shoes or anything. He just boop, and then he goes through. Somehow the system sort of has it in there that like, this is not the same thing. It's not the same status. Like, because you're not eligible for Social Security. You're not asking for any of the benefits and privileges.
But I mean, can you still have a bank account and get a mortgage and all this stuff? I mean, normal.
Yes, under a if you use a. So this is why people complain like, oh, corporations don't pay taxes. Yeah, they don't, and you can also not do that because if you're identifying and having again, it's like the car ownership thing. If you own the car, you don't own the car. You have rights of use of the car.
Uh-huh.
The trust set up in your name. In your all caps version of your name, if you have a bank account in that entity, they own the entity and they can go through there and like get your, if the IRS wants to, get the IRS. So like, can a police officer issue a citation to, can they issue well, I mean, they can, but no, they can't. You don't get a ticket. Walmart doesn't get a ticket from the police.
Right. Okay.
Right. Because Walmart isn't a person. And the only reason you can get one is because you are identifying your person with the corporation that you're under. Sounds ridiculous.
Well, wouldn't that mean that Walmart should be able to get a ticket? If the corporation gets the ticket, not me?
Well, Walmart, yeah. So, well, no, you're paying for the thing. They're giving it to you.
Okay.
And then you're using your money, which is under the trust that you've established to pay for it. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So like they can issue you things, but but they don't have any. And I know this sounds crazy. I understand. You're free. I don't blame you if you don't believe me. It's fine. But so like, well, just like so. Let's say that you owed taxes, but you had a company called Foodie Incorporated, in which all your money was in.
Right.
Foodie LLC. Now you owe taxes. Can the IRS go and take money out of Foodie LLC's bank account to pay for it? No, because it's a separate entity. Yeah. Same thing. If you're identifying with that entity, then yeah, because you're treating yourself as the same. And so you can do all these things, but you basically set up a separate entity to do them for you. And then that gives you, it's basically a liability shield just in your everyday life.
So then you would then set up a different corporation to do all those things. Like,
well, actually, what you do is when KL went through this, he said, I actually assume I have a higher right to this all caps name than the government does, and I would like to take it on. Can you prove that I don't? And so KL has this certification. He did it in the state of Georgia, and it's certified by I believe it was. What was the name of the guy that did that? Brian Kemp, maybe?
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the Secretary of the State of Georgia, and it claims on there in black and white writing. It says, "I am a," he says, "a private citizen of the United States, private American national, non-U.S. citizen under Section 1 of the 14th Amendment Constitution of the continental United States of America." Bada bing, bada boom.
He has this. So he has this document signed. If it was Secretary of State, I think that's Raffensperger.
Well, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, whoever it was. Yeah. Whoever was Brian Kemp ever the secretary of anything?
He's governor, I think, to Georgia.
Okay. So he may be on there too. And yeah, he has this document, and it's private. Yeah, it says like you're no longer a non-U.S. because the U.S. citizenship. It's just like there's always two worlds operating at the same time. There's always two jurisdictions. Just like people make a big deal about the city of London and London the city.
Yeah.
It's the same everywhere over the whole world. There's the United States of America, and then there's the American national, the private American. They're two different things, and they both realms exist at the same time. And you can be in one or the other. And it's exactly what sort of Jesus was talking about. Let the dead bury their dead, because you're identifying with a corpus. Your fake name, which is why when someone walks into faith, they are given a new name every time. All right, Paul becomes Saul. Peter, he becomes Peter. Abraham becomes Abraham. Jacob becomes Israel every time.
Okay.
Because it's all very spiritual. Your fake identity is your dead corpus, your persona, and the real one is something else. And so it's just like the city of London and London the city. That framework operates over the whole world because there's two separate, and it should be that way because a lot of people do not want to govern themselves. And so this is provided as the option. In fact, most people don't. But yeah, he has an official thing from the state of Georgia saying that he is a private American national, non-U.S. citizen.
Okay.
And so when you're a non-U.S. citizen, are you liable for IRS taxes? No. But just like Faith could,
non-citizens pay taxes. Non-citizens pay taxes.
Well, I guess if you're doing sales tax and stuff.
But even if you get like a work visa, maybe that's the same thing in this model. You're setting up a trust.
Right, yeah. If you're doing a work visa, it's the same idea.
Okay.
But he doesn't have like the if you never had a birth certificate, you never had anything like that, what would the IRS even do?
Right.
Right? There's nothing you have no. It's the same thing. And so just like Faith, the girl who didn't exist, because she had no paperwork, you sort of are there. You have rights of an American national, which is basically the Bill of Rights, pretty much. And you can, just like the Amish, you can buy and trade and sell, but you can't do any of the things in commerce. You have to do everything, at least privately. You can set up, like I said, you could set up a trust in your name, just like they did, to do these things. And it's actually interesting. When they send you this document, they're operating in both realms, and they sort of know it. I don't know if they know it cognitively or if it's just a form, but not. They say that they're the commander in chief of the sworn officers, whatever. And then also it says, so it's by the head of state, commander in chief, and then comma His Excellency Brian Kemp.
So there's like civil and naval, or
civil and naval terms,
okay.
Yeah. And when you're operating in the private realm, he uses his civil terms.
Okay.
Just like, and this people do that, and Kay, I don't know how deep this goes, but KL's even like, oh yeah, there's like the post office and then the office of the post. You're like, what? He's like, yeah, when you use registered mail, that's private mail, and when you use non-registered mail, it's public mail. And that's why private mail is always in red, because the red means red is like blood, like natural.
Okay.
Which is interesting. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
But there's always the two jurisdictions operating at one time. And so this is why what I'm telling you, listener, is that if you want to, now be a little careful about it. Like, do your research, because it is a little bit. You ever read Artemis Fowl?
No.
It was this, I think it was Artemis Fowl. Anyway, it was this book of this kid, and he was like dealing with summoning demons and stuff for powers. And he had to like draw the circles on the ground just right, because if he didn't get it just right, they would like backfire on him.
Okay.
It's a little like that, because you are dealing in like word magic here. So just don't go in there and be like, because you can incriminate yourself. I really know what you're doing. But if you want to, you can renounce U.S. citizenship with all the benefits and privileges that come with it, still remain an American national, still have all the rights of a human being, but you will not get like Social Security and so on and so forth. But you will also not be subject to a lot of the same things. And the people that I've talked to who have gone through this process, and there aren't very many that have, because they're like, they carry this little proof everywhere they go in case something is necessary or whatever. And it's like a sort of a magic key for a lot of things. He's like, well, actually, that doesn't apply to me. I'm not I'm a American national, and I don't do that. Like, oh, okay, well, here you go. You know, it's very interesting. Very interesting. So, yeah, I think there is a direct through line between Tiamat and your birth certificate and your Social Security card. It's the same thing. Nothing has ever gone away.
Right.
It's just you didn't know where to look for it.
Okay.
You know, like I tell people, like the flood. People are like, "Where's the floodwaters?" I'm like, "It's in the ocean right now." Used to, there wasn't as much water.
Okay.
Right. It's all right here. You're living, and so it's. I don't know. Was any of that intriguing to you?
Yeah.
Did you find any of that interesting?
Yes, and it raises a lot of interesting legal questions.
It makes a disturbing amount of sense.
Yeah.
Which is what, because we've been thinking about this for a long time, like how did this work? And then some guy was like, he's like, well, I'll just go through the process and get every document. It took him years, and he's like, but is this the same thing as the placenta? Is it who's being named here? And we were like, of course, because that's the dead matter lost at sea, which creates the straw man that you identify with. It's all legal. The devil he'll stand up before God on the judgment day and say, I never did anything illegal, and he may be right. It doesn't mean he won't be punished,
right?
But he never did anything illegal.
Because just being legal doesn't make you good.
Exactly. But he never did any. He's like, I was all by the book,
right?
And they agreed to it. And that's why you always have to. That's why they always have to tell you, because your consent is essential in forming these contracts. You also can't vote if you do this, by the way. But I mean, who cares about that?
So, like, how do you get if you don't have a social security number, how do you get a normal job?
Well, there's some things you just can't do normally.
Okay.
Or quote unquote normally. Right? But you have to ask yourself, like, well, it's up to you.
Yeah.
If you want to live, which realm you want to live in.
So you gotta decide, is the juice worth the squeeze? Because you'll be...
Is the juice worth the squeeze?
Like, how do you purchase property? I guess so. If you're setting up,
well, so you still can.
If you
as an American national,
you can still purchase property, but what?
Do
you have to pay taxes on it?
The tools of commerce for like mortgages and so on.
Okay, you basically have to pay cash.
Yeah, just like pay because you can hold titles and deeds,
right?
But you don't enter into trust agreements because those are the realm of commerce, and those can only be done by corpses or dead bodies.
Right.
So if you want all these, so it's just like you can. It's not like it's exclusively bad. Like it's there for a reason, but it is like, I think the purpose is you're supposed to grow out of that system and take charge of your own responsibility in life. Like you can't get insurance there, you know, and so on. Like I said, you can form, because you are allowed to form. You're allowed to form your own corpus. So you can sort of do it through a backdoor way, but it is complicated and doesn't quite flow as well.
Right. So if you were to like do this and then form an LLC for yourself, and then that LLC, it has a tax liability, but if it generates no profit in the year because you're just spending all that money on the stuff of life, then you pay no taxes. Am I following this argument?
Yeah, basically. And people do this, and they don't get, nothing happens to them. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how you're on the hook for all this stuff. Everything has to be justified. Like the world actually is fair. It's just. It operates under just rules because it's a just God, but they're perverted and under the guise of magic spells, which is deception, to trick people into doing things that they may not want to do.
Right.
And it's all it is, all the way down. And
so if you have income taxes, if you have an income tax liability, then it's because you're operating, the form of corporation you're operating has that sort of income tax exposure, whereas if you were operating a different sort of corporation to do commerce, it would not have that exposure. But you have to move your trust agreement away from the first one and to the new one.
Correct.
This is all very weird.
And it's very strange, but like the fact that like he has these where they said like you're no longer you're a US, it's an American national, means that there's a there. Like I don't know if we've got all this 100% right, but it's enough right that the US government recognizes some of it.
Okay, and yeah, I guess the fact that people have gotten results.
They get like a thing from the state signed by the thing, like sealed with the seal on it and everything. Like, okay, yeah, here you go. Under the new name, it's not all caps, it's this.
Right.
It's like, well, there you go. Something's happening here.
Well,
and
so if you do crack a code to get this thing or whatever, so the state did say, oh, yep, congratulations, you got it. Couldn't somebody just say, okay, well, there must be some sort of document somewhere to govern this, and then FOIA that document?
What do you mean?
Like, just say, I mean, this guy's been requesting all these documents. Why doesn't he request the document that governs the issuance of the thing that he just got? This thing, the American National.
Oh, he got that document directly, as far as I know.
Right, but then there's got to be some sort of legal code governing the generation of that document.
Oh yeah, that's in the well, it depends on your countries how they work these out, but that was done, I believe, the United States in 1933.
Wait, what?
So it's already there. I mean, I didn't want to get into all that part because like the details of how the city of London was formed in separation of London the city are so complicated. And it's a similar process, apparently. It's very difficult to work through of how it happened in America, where you have like American national. You have basically one set of laws for American nationals, and then another one for U.S. citizenship. Because the U.S. citizenship is a trust set up to pay the federal debts of the U.S. government, and you sign on to that with certain rights and privileges. And it's a back and forth thing. It's a lot of like the U.S. government going bankrupt and then asking money. It's a crazy.
Does this
story.
have anything to do with the creation of the Federal Reserve?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, just long story short, after the war, we didn't have any money, but we owed money to France and other places. And so they said, well, okay, that's fine. We'll defer. So we'll defer the payments for 70 years, which is the standard thing, if you give us certain legal titles to certain things. So they would give them like legal titles to certain government buildings and like national land and so on and so forth. And then 70 years comes and goes, and they're like, well, it still doesn't. It's still not good. They didn't have the money. You don't have now with the interest, right? And then, so then you get to again, it's confusing. So then after that 70 years, now the debt is up to 18 million, and they don't have it. You know. So then they form a constitution, which is a continental Congress, because they had a continental Congress. And that just doesn't have the money. So they form a thing that goes bankrupt, and they reconstitute with a constitution, a new trust to handle the sureties of the original 13 states. Then 70 years after that, they go bankrupt again, right? Because they don't have the money. They have the Civil War to sort of pay for it because it was about slavery, but it was also about they didn't want to pay on for the debt of the other states.
Yeah.
Right? And they were like, no, you will. 70 years after that, we get basically the Great Depression because they had to reset the thing.
You mean the first Great Depression, like in 19?
Yeah, the first Great Depression,
whenever it was.
So you had the 3 sets of 70, right? And so then 70 years after that, we still don't have the money, but you can only bankrupt a country 3 times under international law, apparently, with a 20-year grace period, and that brings us to basically 2019. You have the thing. I know it's all great, but it's all this. They have to do these resets because they are contractually obligated to, and so are you because you're a U.S. citizen to fulfill these debts. Everything is debt based. The devil works through debt, and in economics. This is why money is the root of all kinds of evil. Like money is not in the realm of God. Money is the realm of corpus and the dead. That's why, it's, and so that's how it all. This is why Satan is depicted. He even claims that he has all the nations of the world, and Jesus doesn't say he doesn't. He's like, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world, and Jesus isn't like, you don't have those. No, he does have those because they're his corpuses, they're his entities that have been created, and it's always been this way under various legal guises, and every time the debt comes due, you have to pay with a pound of flesh. So now people just defer the payments, and that's why things get worse and worse and worse over time because it's compounding interest. And you can just say you can opt out of it at any time you want, but then you don't get the privileges that come with being under the dragon's wing.
Oh my!
No, it's crazy, but this is actually how things work. Like this, I know people like this. Like it's all my sort of mission is to show people it's all right here, and it always has been.
Okay.
Right under your nose.
Mm-hmm.
This is how things operate. Like this is why Jesus didn't have to pay taxes. He did, not to make a fuss. But remember, Peter comes in and says they were asking about the taxes. He says, what do you think? Do the sons of the kings pay taxes, or do they get it from other people? He says, from others. He says, so the sons are exempt. He was a sovereign citizen. Right, I mean, he was he's saying he didn't have to do it, and this is why he was. This is why he gets away with so much impunity, flouting the law around Israel, because he's not under the same jurisdiction, and it doesn't that's not explicitly spelled out, but when you're operating under a different realm, you're in the realm of the living and not the dead. The realm of the land and not of the sea, different things apply.
So
I know this is one of the craziest episodes ever.
No, my brain is totally fried. And I'm not.
I know.
I don't know that I can come up with many good questions. I was thinking about the placenta thing, and correct me if I'm wrong, but placentas are used in a lot of black magic stuff, occultism, and all that stuff, right? Because they're substituting you for the part of you. And then that dies. And then they claim that is, they want you to agree to it. The devil doesn't actually have real power. He has deception. He can't really do miracles. He can do deception. Right. Right. And that's his fake version of a miracle. And what it is because living human beings, living men and women, are co-creators of creation. We have the divine spark. We have creative power. And so he can deceive us into using our creative power for his ends, but he does not have it himself. He has no power, actually. He only has influence. All of the power lies with us, but he can tempt you to use that power. The knot milk has no power. It can only convince you to give up yours. That's all it can do. Right. That's all it's ever done. And that's why I said last show, these things are all voluntary. And they've always been. And it is annoying to have to deal with it. Well, it is now I don't understand all the stuff we just went through. It doesn't. Yeah, I know. It doesn't make sense to me. But I do know when in the little kernel of the idea here goes along with my experience in that myself and people that I know, when they decided I'm just not going to participate in COVID nonsense, there were no consequences most of the time, unless they were to some degree self-inflicted.
Right. Every time. And you have to be careful about that. That's why I said you have to be careful about self-incrimination.
Right.
Because they will, like, try to nail you on, like, well, you said you were this. And so
like some of the tricks are, like, some people got tricks that were harder to figure out and get around than others, you know. Right.
Everything's all your participation in the U.S. government is voluntary. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Yeah, that's like a much bigger pill than participation in COVID is voluntary. but that's the thing is, like, we're now pretty much on the back end of this thing, and some people participated willingly, and some people didn't. Yeah, they just said no, I'm not going to participate, and everybody got what they wanted. The people that wanted to participate participated.
The world is fair.
Yeah. That's the interesting thing is, like,
exactly what you want.
People got what they wanted out of COVID.
Yeah. And that's
if they wanted to be martyred, if they wanted to be COVID martyred, they got COVID martyred or whatever. If they wanted to be left alone and they really went after it, they got left alone. Yeah. You know, if they wanted to go into full hysterics and become a little petty tyrant on a psychotic rampage, they did that. Everybody got what they wanted out of COVID.
Everyone gets what they want out of everything. God, that's the thing. Like, this is the best of all possible worlds because this is what you want. That's a bitter pill to swallow. But but it's true because the what comes with not doing it is scary to people. And
well, yeah, like deciding to refuse to participate in COVID was scary. Because you're like, every time you walk into a store without a mask on, at some certain points, you're like, oh, what are they going to call the police on me? Because that was the perception, is like, if you don't wear a mask in here, you're going to have the police called and you'll be hauled off to jail or arrested or fined or whatever. And did that really happen? No, not really.
Right. It's all illusion. It's just that's why I harp on the Matrix. It's just an illusion. It's a magic spell cast over you.
But it's like there's certain things like moral. If you break a law that is actually rooted in moral, like if you kill somebody, you're going to get arrested for that. That's not voluntary. Yeah, you will be involuntary.
And being a sovereign citizen doesn't exempt you from that. And no one ever claims it does because you're still under God's law.
Well, I think that's of these ideas about things being voluntary. The big objection that gets thrown up is, well, go kill somebody and see what happens. You know, you're not exempt. It doesn't exempt you. It's like, well, so I think it's important if you're making the case to differentiate those two things. Because like COVID, all the COVID regulations, those aren't based in any moral law. That was just hysteric death games.
The only law that exists that's non-voluntarily is the law of God, basically the Ten Commandments. Yeah. And if you transgress against that, there are justifiably and rightly mechanisms to deal with you for like killing someone or something, right? But the rest of them are all things you sign on to, just like you sign on for the UCMJ, because they give you titles and privileges and stuff.
Right.
You don't have to do any of it. That's the crazy bit. Like, if you want to like have the title, if you want to be like doctor and PhD, then you got to sign on and get the security number and the birth certificate and all that. If you want the insurance paperwork, if you want all that, that's why I talked about the human farming. Like it's the same. You can opt out of all of it if you would like to.
This has been interesting because we've taken the idea of your participation in this is voluntary, and you've like fully extrapolated it against an entire human life. In every interaction, which I'm not sure I follow all the mechanics of what you just did there.
I know it's very It's confusing on purpose because it's a deception. Like they name things the same thing, or like certificate of live birth versus birth certificate, and people in their head think it's the same, but it's not. Yeah. Right? It's confusing on purpose because they don't want you to. It's sort of like a test of like how awake are you.
Right.
And if you get awake enough, then it's like, okay, you can walk out. And they sort of are just like, yeah, it's fine, man. It's cool.
I do
They
want
don't get mad at
to.
you.
I am kind of interested in requesting a copy of my certificate of live birth now, though.
Yeah. And like I said, Suey, it took him like a year to get it, so it may be
Interesting. All right.
It may be. They don't like to give that to you, but keep a record of everything that you do, because that acts as like in legal sense, because it all has to be by the book. It's like, well, they received my request. They received it 3 times. They ignored it, and not responding to a request that has been received is a legal action itself, right? And so then in court you can say like, well, they didn't give it to me, so they said that's an admission that they didn't have it or something.
Right.
But yeah, this is all. Everything is real. It's all been Tiamat from the beginning. It's always been Tiamat. See? The reason that you have a PhD is because of Tiamat. And I will not back down from that statement.
I'm rolling the outro.
People don't think it is, be like it is, but it do.
They do.
It do be like it is.
My brain hurts.
Targets up here, we just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object that almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast, right over the top of us.